Good morning, good morning, good morning. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes. Folks are parking, we just want to give them a second to get in, so we'll get started in about 5 minutes. Thank you. director and lead organizer of the Columbus Education Justice Coalition. On behalf of CEJC, welcome to the inaugural The People's State of Our Schools. Thank you for being here. Families, educators, students, neighbors, and partners, thank you all. Today is about truth-telling, collective vision, and action. And so we gather here today at a pivotal moment in public education in Columbus. Across our city, across the country, our communities are grappling with school closures, underfunding, and decisions made without meaningful community input. But today, we center something different, the voices of the people most impacted. Because when it comes to our schools, it must be nothing about us without us. So allow me to give you a little housekeeping. Please maintain mask wearing throughout the event. That includes your nose to your chin fully covered. If at any time we understand you need a break, feel free to step into the lobby, into the restrooms, or outside so you can take your quick mask break. This allows us to make our space safer for those with compromised immune systems and to prevent the unintentional spread of any viruses. Also, outside of the theater doors, restrooms are located to the right. Each of you should have received the People's State of Our Schools zine so that you can follow along and actively engage in today's discussion. If you did not receive a zine, please use the QR code above to access it digitally and save a treat, or you can raise your hand and one of our amazing volunteers will bring one to you if they are still available in print. Before we move into conversation, we want to ground ourselves in the lived experiences that bring us here. So behind every school closure is a story of students displaced, families disrupted, educators reassigned, and neighborhoods altered. Since 2004, over 36 Columbus City schools, neighborhood schools, have closed or been realigned. Several buildings have been purchased by charter schools, many have been left in blight, and others demolished. We understand that many factors influence our school board's decision-making, including the unconstitutional funding of Ohio's public schools. Our state government has stripped schools of funding, fattening the wallets of private and charters through the voucher system, penalizing school districts by charging fines for the transportation of students who choose charter schools, and locally, our city has given away millions of dollars yearly in tax abatements from the property taxes that make up the majority of our school funding here in Ohio. Briefly, you will witness a short documentary capturing the human impact of these decisions, not just in policy terms, but in personal ones. As you watch, we invite you to reflect on what Columbus City Schools means in your life and in your community. Let's begin.
The Board of Education voted on closures last week. These 4 new closures are on top of 5 others that will close this school year.
It's not just education, it's literally the center of community for so many people.
The district budget is $1.8 billion. Where does all of that money go?
Kind of upsetting, I feel like the kids need their education, and the more schools they take out of the community, it makes it harder for the kids to learn.
Provocative, nigga. You know what I mean? Shit, styles are crazy, dangerous. Bust shit on the beats, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, yo, niggas over there, we gonna say, yo, we gonna play some funky shit. Straight up.
When a school closes,
Each point to Charlotte, y'all better know that. Yeah.
a community doesn't just lose a building. It loses stability. It loses history.
Living life on the merry-go-round, you can't find out why.
It's losing.
Oklahoma City Schools is closing down 4 school buildings. The Board of Education voted on closures last week. These 4 new closures are on top of 5 others that will close this school year.
It's not just education, it's literally the center of community for so many people.
The district budget is $1.8 billion. Where does all of that money go?
Kind of upsetting, I feel like the kids need their education, and the more schools they take out of the community, it makes it harder for kids to learn.
When a school closes, a community doesn't just lose a building. It loses stability. It loses history. It loses its heart, a place where relationships are built and futures are imagined. On the south side of Columbus, school closures have not been isolated events. They happen again and again, even as we speak, reshaping neighborhoods, displacing families, and leaving lasting harm in their wake. What was once the heart of the community has, in many cases, been reduced to an empty lot or replaced by something that no longer serves the people who once depended on it.
My name is Sheila Eubanks. I am a resident of the South Side since 1967. I've seen some changes that I can say I'm not sure I agree with. The far South Side is 25 square miles. The South Side also is the side of town that we are getting several hundreds of apartment units. However, these issues that we have going on in Columbus City Schools, they did not just start. This has been a long time coming. We knew we would end up here when they started changing the feeder pattern to our high schools, and that was many years ago. And I believe that's where a lot of this started.
The first time that I truly understood the cost of a school closure is when I personally went through a school closure as an educator. In 2011, I was teaching at Deshler Elementary School, which is my former elementary school, as a student as well. And we found out on the news that year that we were closing, that our school was being closed. Before you're physically displaced, you experience emotional displacement. I can remember the feeling of despair that I felt personally. There was a cloud in our building for the remainder of that school year. There were students who were crying in the hallways because we were their family, and they had already in their home lives been displaced and moved around so many times that our school and our school family, our staff, had become their constant, and now that was being taken away from them.
My name is Sarah Alexander. I went to Columbus City Schools and graduated from Columbus State Community College. I started off at Deshler Elementary School, then moved on to the first Moeller and then the second Moeller and South High School in Fort Hays. Thinking back on my first school closure, I mainly remember switching between 2 to 3 different schools within the first few years of being in elementary school, which was very confusing as a child and took a bit of my confidence away because every year I would have to relearn the layout of the school and just like teachers, the building, the classmate. Once I was integrated into the new school, I was able to like do my work and everything and learn, but I also had that wonder, like, will this happen again? Like, what's the next time I'm gonna have to move schools because I've done it so often?
The far south side actually had 2 middle schools. We had Berry Junior High and we had Buckeye Junior High, which now is middle school. Berry has been closed for years, so we took a hit on that middle school. It's actually slated for demolition. Buckeye, there's actual conversation for that school to be closed, which would leave the whole far south side of town with no middle school. That would leave us with approximately 2, 3 elementary schools, no middle school, and 1 high school to whom there was talk of closing it.
When you have a school, that housed hundreds of students, graduated hundreds of students over the years, and then it then turns into private apartment complexes, there is that cultural erasure of, and those memories too for those people.
When my school was closed, I feel like I lost a lot of the control, stability, and consistency that I needed as a child. I wasn't able to go through school knowing that I'll be in one place where I need to be and get all the education that I need with the same teachers or maybe the same people and the faces I'm familiar with.
When the schools started closing in the community, I feel as though in general in Columbus, regardless of neighborhood, we don't have as much green public space as we should. And so the schools really step in and fill that need in communities. South High School being a great example of that for us. I've taught both my kids to drive in the school parking lot there. We go to sporting events there all the time for the kids to cheer on their friends. The school theater productions, attending those, but it just creates just this positive energy that you sorely miss when those schools go away.
Really feel like school plays a big part in community. It makes the community. That's where parents go and meet other parents. That's where students go. And we feel safe in our schools, where we meet our friends. When you take that aspect out of it, to me, it's like taking a part of the community. And that's how I feel in the Southfield area or in the far south area, that, every time they close a school, a part of our community is being broke off.
When communities are excluded from decisions about their schools, there is a disconnect that happens between the families and students and educators and the school district itself. And what that does is it creates this gap in this area for distrust and misalignment. And then you have, instead of a community working together, you have people at odds with one another, because then the parents and the families, the students are not being heard. Their considerations are not being taken, or their needs aren't being taken into consideration, and it just really creates friction.
I think there's better ways to get community involvement when it comes to speaking about our schools and discussing closures. I just attended a meeting at South High School, and it was, about the state of our schools, and I'm one that pays attention. I've been to, I ain't gonna say closed meetings, but group meetings. And if they would have just said what was stated in the group meeting, it would have been more understandable to our community. What was said at that meeting, I didn't even understand. And I ain't gonna say I'm totally involved, but I am somewhat involved. I know what's going on, but the way it was stated to our parents and the community, it was just hard to understand.
Rebuilding trust between schools and neighborhoods means that, one, you don't have folks fighting one another, right? It truly becomes community-centered, student-centered, and not student-facing, not community-facing, where we get to put on this mask for the community and this mask for the students, and then take that off at the end of the day. No. When it is centered, it is at the heart of it all, and every decision is made in tangent, together. Educators feel heard, families feel heard, students, who all of this is centered around, have a voice, a respected and valued voice in the decisions for their schools. And so it takes on a whole new meaning for education, a whole new meaning for futures, and it also allows community members and school districts and all of the folks in between to dream out loud together and to come up with those solutions to make those dreams actually possible.
Well, I think it's very important not just to include parents, community members, but also students in these decisions when it comes to preserving schools and institutions for these kids in the future. What any child needs is stability. And when they don't have that, even something as simple as like the CODA levy, when it passed, and so many kids are dependent on CODA Plus in this neighborhood in particular. So what seemed like a positive thing, a lot of kids on the heels of that ended up getting logged out of their CODA Plus account. And so, these kids, when I would talk to them, it wasn't a matter of, oh, I just got logged out of the app, I'm trying to figure out. It was just they stopped going to school. So you have these like built-in processes, routines for kids that create a sense of normalcy in their daily lives. And, it builds so much between like trust, but also just confidence in them going about their day and knowing that they're not going to get dropped into a situation where they're feeling uncomfortable.
As a student, I think being able to put in a decision towards if the school closures are gonna happen would mean a lot. In elementary school, we didn't get that decision. So getting the choice of if we want to move schools, because it happened every year, I think having a decision or an input of if this should even happen, I think it could contribute a lot to the community because there wasn't that decision. So we got a lot of moves in the school system. So it just became really confusing for young children like me.
There's the financial cost and the so-called savings that maybe the school district experienced closing that building. But what it cost emotionally for us as staff members and for those students is incomprehensible.
Even though I just graduated college, I would say I still lost a lot of what I needed. Even now, sometimes I feel like I don't know what I want to do. Going through middle school, elementary school, high school, I didn't have a full idea of what I wanted to do. I often switched between a lot of occupations and wondered what's next for me. If I hadn't experienced those school closures, I would have had the stability I needed to make those decisions in my life now.
The community schools model, it matters now more than ever before because of the state of the world that we are in and all of the things that we are dealing with and facing because of past decisions that were made during desegregation, during times of redlining and all of those things, right? We've lost this connection between the schools and between the homes. We need each other, and this needs to be a symbiotic relationship. Schools and homes should be working together. They are different, but there is an alignment that is there. There's a relationship that is there. And the community schools model gets us back to that.
At, like Marion Franklin, we have Children's Hospital on site. I think it would be awesome to maybe have Jobs and Family Services 1 or 2 days out of the week. I would love to see a room where we have, and some schools have this, you know, extra clothes and toiletries, right there on down to maybe Mid-Ohio Collective, having some sort of room with a freezer in it and a student being able to say, you know, we don't have no food tonight, and be able to go to that room and pick out something for dinner.
The impact that I've seen with the community school model already being implemented at one of our high schools here in Columbus is this, oh my gosh, it's hard to put into words, but for a lack of better words, I would say investment or reinvestment, not just with funding, right? Not even with funding. Let's talk about emotionally. There's an emotional investment from the neighbors, like folks who don't even have kids at the school, in the school, and that's invaluable.
To attend a school rooted in community support, I honestly feel like that would mean a lot because not only would I have the support from the community, I would have the stability that I need. I would have more guides and just be able to have more confidence in myself as a child, but also as an adult because I had that support all this time.
I believe that the community schools model matters now more than ever before because of the time that we are in as a nation and as a state. We need those connections between the schools and the communities. We have to have that bond in order for everybody to do more than just survive. We need that in order to thrive.
technical difficulties as our panelists make their way to the stage. Just wanted to let you all know, again, thank you for being here, for being and remaining masked during this time. Also, this is on YouTube. The Closing the Gap is on YouTube. It premiered at 10 a.m. today. And so while we had a little buffering today, you should be able to view it and share it with your friends and folks online. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing moderator for our panel, a CCS parent, a fashionista in her own right as well. For those of you who don't know, Miss Taria Palmer of Columbus Camp Lake. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isaac. I've had all of that stuff except the fashionista, so I appreciate that. Isaac already talked about a little bit about how I got here, and I actually just have to tell a story about when she called me to do this panel. She was just calling me to ask me to do it, and it ended up being a longer conversation where I was like, honestly crying, because I was like, I said, I don't know if I can do it because I always feel 1 foot in and 1 foot out as a parent in this district. I always feel conflicted about what is the best. At the federal level, it makes it scary to say, what is the best option I have to make sure that my child can survive in this country, let alone thrive? So we had a whole conversation about it, and she just really validated my feelings to the point where I am sitting up here today because I believe this conversation is so important. I also live on the Near East Side, and so I don't feel like I should have to pay for school or drive super far for my child to go to school, right? I live in this neighborhood. And so I'm really excited and honored for you all to be here today. And I just want to thank everyone for sitting with the stories on this documentary because it's so important to hear from the people who are directly impacted. And what we just mentioned is not abstract. I just told you about my personal story. It's happening here and it's happening now. The impact of school closures ripple far beyond buildings, and they affect stability, trust, opportunity, and the social fabric of our neighborhoods. And so we've got some folks here to help us think more deeply about where we are, think about where we must go. And so we've invited some thoughtful community leaders and community voices to join us in this conversation. So during this panel, as you're listening, feel free to share your reflections and your questions. So located on the screen is a QR code. And so we invite you to add your thoughts to the word cloud using the prompts on the screen. And at a point, we'll also pause for questions and comments from the audience. When we get ready to get into the Q&A portion, just please raise your hand to share your questions with our volunteers using the form within your booklet that you all should have gotten in the front of the theater. So we hope to get to as many questions as we can. So let's get started, y'all. It's my honor to introduce our panelists. As I mentioned, each of them brings lived experience, professional expertise, and a deep commitment to public education. So together, they represent local and national perspectives on school closures, community-led solutions, and the future of public schools. So just to sort of set the foundation here, we're going to explore 3 core themes. That's the impact of school closures on communities, why the sustainable community school model matters here in Columbus, and what the future of public education in school should look like. So that's just to ground us in what we're going to be discussing today. And so please join me in welcoming our panelists. We can say a round of applause to them. Who we have with us today. Christopher Montero is a teacher at Northland High School. He's CCS's first school to adopt the NEA community school model. I heard about you too already before this. So I'm glad to meet you in person.
Very nice to meet you.
Thank you. And then, sorry, I gotta find my page. Harlow Swaney is a student at Northland. Thank you for joining us, Harlow. Adeline Strupp is Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Community Learning Center Institute in Cincinnati, which is a national leader in the community schools movement. Thanks for joining us as well. And then we also have Kyle Surratt from the National Education Association and a leading advocate and organizer for community schools. So thank you all so much for joining us. So let's get started with the questions. Anyone can answer. Some of them I'll direct, exactly to you, but this one's more of a broad question. Okay. So when you think about the history of school closures in Columbus and across the country, what comes up for you? What do communities lose when a neighborhood school closes?
So I think about the school closures that we had most recently, and when the Columbus Education Justice Coalition was really organizing to fight against this in 2024. And what sticks out to me the most is just how much the community, the parents, were not involved in this process. It was happening to them, not with them. And it was just devastating. Unfortunately, with the school board we had at the time especially, so much of it felt like they thought their communication was just magically reaching people and everybody knew what was going on. But the truth is a lot of those families just had no idea, and then suddenly, bam, their school is being closed. And they don't know what's going to come next. And even with the district, really didn't know what was coming next for those families either. So there was no real plan in place, and ultimately that's devastating for those families to know that their school was closing and to have no idea why.
What it reminds me of is that the top 5% of our country spend 50% of all the things. So this just means that we have some families that have so much wealth that they're buying yachts and houses and all these crazy things, and we're closing schools. Those are choices. In Massachusetts, it took 40, 50 years, but a few years ago, we passed a tax there on people that made $1 million or more. Not like assets, it's just like your salary is $1 million, and then if you made $1 million and $1, we just tax that extra dollar 4 cents. And we were able to get $3 billion per year from 25,000 families. And let me just put that in perspective. There are 8 million people that live in Massachusetts, and 25,000 people are giving us $3 billion, and we got free college, free transportation, free food for all kids, and you can do that here. It's gonna take a fight, and it's gonna take power, but that's what we're here for here. It's to build power. This is a moment in time when all of us come together and realize it can be different, and it should be different. So what are we going to leave the next generation with?
And thanks for uplifting that.
First, thank you guys so much for spending your Saturday morning here, learning and in this discussion. So being from Cincinnati, we have been working to build out community schools for the past 25 years now. So I feel like we have a lot of perspective in where, the starting point and then some successful stories through building community learning centers out district-wide. In seeing the film and hearing the story, there's a lot of familiar themes. So in Cincinnati, in the early 2000s, we were at a crisis point. Our enrollment, or student enrollment in Cincinnati Public Schools at its peak, we had 90,000 students enrolled in Cincinnati Public. During that time, during the 2000s, we had dropped in half to 45,000. So we were really, losing enrollment. We were having these discussions about school closures and realignment. And we had, this crisis moment, and what we say is with crisis comes opportunity. And how do we utilize this as a turning point for our district, for our students. So during that time, we actually underwent a facilities master plan. So we were by the Ohio Supreme Court deemed that by our facilities alone, we had to undergo this facilities master plan because students could not learn because our buildings were in such poor shape. And so we used that opportunity to build out this community schools model and to go neighborhood by neighborhood, school by school, and say, what is the vision for the future of this school, of this neighborhood? What do you need in order to be successful? And
that was really our turning point. And so from that time, you know, we were really in a crisis point where we were closing schools. And now, 25 years later, through this model, we are seeing our growth in our enrollment and our population. We're actually at a point now where we're adding schools. And so I just want to really impress the transformational impact that the community schools model has had in Cincinnati Public. That is something that when you listen to the community, when you involve them, we say it's not about buy-in, it's about ownership, right? It's really the community driving this process, saying what it is that they need. And ultimately, public schools are for the public. So how do you utilize that building as an asset for students, community, and families?
Thank you. And you mentioned Cincinnati being at this for 25 years. One of the things that struck me when I left my little town in Northeast Ohio to OU for college is meeting Cincinnati people. They have such a connection and an identity in the schools that they go to, and it's just been a thread that I've seen. This is also in Cleveland, but I definitely see it in Cincinnati as well. So I have another question that I'm going to direct first to Kyle, and then anyone else can answer if you feel so moved. How have school closures impacted families, educators, and neighborhoods, particularly Black, Brown, immigrant, and working class communities? What patterns do you see locally and nationally?
It's the same everywhere. Those who have the least get the least, and those who have the most have everything they need. So, and it's problematic on every scale. It's what contributes to the school to prison pipeline, the school to low wage work pipeline. These are all knowns. And the question really is, what are we going to fight for? How can we win? How can we do the risky thing to go on strike or community strikes or all those types of things to demonstrate our power so that your zip code does not determine your outcome in life. And that is what's true in America. If you read every single book on poverty, the wealthy, the best determinant if you're going to be wealthy is if your parents are wealthy. And the best determinant if you're going to be middle class is if your parents are middle class. And if you live in a middle class neighborhood. And the same as if you're poor. But that's not the narrative we get in America, is it? It's this American dream thing, right? That anyone can make it. And then they point out some outliers and say, look, that's possible. But we all know who have kids, I have two, they fall down all the time, right? And those who have resources can pick them up. And those who have 3 jobs aren't even there to pick them up. And so impact of school closures is just a part of a broader story of divestment. And so we at the NEA, folks who don't know, the National Education Association is the largest union in the country, is the most powerful education organization in the country. And for years, we thought that if we just made those 1,000 hours where students spend in school amazing, like the most amazing shit you've ever seen, that we could do that American dream thing. But the truth is, there is no island of excellence. It does not exist. You need to transform those 1,000 hours and the 4,500 hours where students spend outside of school in order to truly transform communities. So that's why the community school model works, is because it doesn't just look towards the 1,000 hours. It looks towards those 4,500 hours. And when you take the school so it is a really problematic thing, something I've been passionate about for a long time. And it's something that we now are using our power for, where we're on the sidelines, we're right in the middle of the fight, and we're gonna be in the middle of the fight from now until, I don't know, forever.
Arlo, I want to get you into this conversation a little bit, and I'm just kind of curious, like while you were watching that documentary, if you knew about any of that was going on, and really like what it would be like for you and your family if you heard Northland is going to be closing, you're going to Brookhaven, or excuse me, another school that closes in the community, you're going to Beechcroft next year. I mean, what would you lose? What would that be like for you and your family?
I feel like if I had to move because my school was closing down, I feel really upset because of the relationships I've built with high school. And I feel like for other people, it's really difficult with like financial situations and transportation. It can be really hard trying to figure out what school is best to go to.
How about you though? Like you're in the educator network, right? Like how have you seen school closures impact families, educators, and neighborhoods? If it's not necessarily Northland that's closed.
Yeah, I mean, it is devastating. Unfortunately, the way that it's been done, you just have no idea what's coming next when that school's closing. You get that announcement that the school is going to be shut down. There's no real transition plan for where those families are going to be going, what's going to be happening with your job. And whenever you talk to the educators who are in those schools, they really just have no idea. A lot of them start thinking about just jumping to another district, which is an issue itself, where we lose that experience within our schools. And, you know, educators, come to Kyle's point about how much of a child's experience is outside of the school, right? Well, educators know that too. And so they build connections with that local community. Well, when the school is closing, you lose all those connections. You can shuffle the educator to another school, but suddenly they have to start from scratch with building up with that new community. And so for the immediate areas surrounding that school, yeah, there's just a lot of lost connection, a lot of lost community, and there's a real human toll.
Thanks for everyone's perspective, especially you, Harlow, because you're the one that's most impacted by this. And I'm so glad that we shouldn't be talking about just about the students. So thank you for getting up on Saturday morning and coming and talking with all of us. Here's another question. In many cities, closures are framed as financial or enrollment decisions. What is missing from that conversation?
Well, in Columbus, the actual cost savings that we get from school closures. There was a public records request that the Columbus Education Justice Coalition submitted for how much money we are saving when we close those schools. And the answer that was sent back was that data is not really tracked. There are so many factors when it comes to school funding, school closures, and all of the money that's wrapped up into that. So what's missing from that conversation is just the fact that we don't know exactly how much money we're saving and how that impacts the bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah, seems like something we should know.
Seems pretty important.
How much money we're actually saving on doing it.
And also, I think we have a little bit of a issue with trust of authority. So I was once at a school board meeting, and I was getting ready to testify, but before a school board meeting, they have like an honor guard that comes up, and one of the school board chairs asked the students, like it was up there, it's like, "Hello, sir, what's your name?" And he was like, he couldn't even remember his name, right? But the point I'm trying to say is that's authority. It's fear of authority, fear of all these things. And when someone up on a dais says, we need to close schools, you just are triggered to be like, okay, that's what we need to do, right? But it's not backed up by data. We have tons of experience seeing that school closures does not lead to the savings that they're talking about. A lot of times it has to do with some other industry wanting those buildings, someone that got paid off for this or that, a consulting firm that gets paid to do all these things and say these things. So you really do need to do your research and have a little disrespect for authority. And make yourself the authority. Own that school, own that city council, own that mayor. These are our people. It should reflect our values.
Yeah, I agree. I think more research is needed on the community side as well, because that's what we're here for, right? To build power. And there's so much misinformation or disinformation or no information at all that I think we should be more critical, right, of learning what is actually happening. What is the reason for the things that are happening to us, right? Does anybody else want to add to that question?
I think, over and over again, at the Community Learning Center Institute, we really focus on community engagement and that being the starting point. And I can go on and on about examples of the school board or authority coming in with a decision, thinking, even if we give them a little bit of, grace, on paper, based on the data, and, it might seem like, yeah, that's the right decision, this is the obvious decision. But then when digging in and hearing from the community and being able to build that groundswell of support of residents, of community, and then working to save a school or do some, really implement an initiative that the community is driving, we have seen incredible positive transformation and change. We have one of our schools during the facilities master plan, it's Euler. It was an elementary school, it was failing, and it was in the plan for Cincinnati Public, it was to be torn down, rebuilt, just as an elementary school, and the community came and said, what we really need here is to add a high school. We need to add a high school, we want to be pre-K through 12th grade. Well, all of the data said that would not be successful, that students would not come to that high school. They showed through data that a student of Euler who went through the 8th grade, no, they could not find any student that made it to a 10th grade seat. So those students were just dropping out, not going to a nearby high school. Well, they added a high school after years, I want to say too, it took years of engagement and advocacy. They added a high school, and now Euler High School is one of the top ranked neighborhood high schools in Cincinnati Public. We went from having a graduation rate to 0 to now, last year it was 92%. So we are outperforming the that took time, but I think when you really listen and again, you center community voice and you worked for implementation, you will see those successes. And so I think so much of it goes back to having the time to listen to the community and what they want and need.
Thanks, y'all. So I'm gonna look back here. It looks like we have got folks really being engaged in the back and asking questions or giving their thoughts. In your opinion, what outside factors impact the success of our schools and students? Disenfranchisement of families, apathy, people who have lost the desire to fight, fair school funding, state funding, tax abatements, a deficit mindset of our students, families, and communities. What I'm seeing as like a theme that's coming up from here is like, one is folks think that it's politicians or the government, and some folks are talking about the mindset of students, families, and people who've lost their desire to fight. I think that's an interesting like dichotomy there. Does anybody have any thoughts on that are like coming up as you're listening to that, hearing that?
So many thoughts, yeah. On apathy in particular, in a lot of organizer training, we talk about the fact that apathy does not really exist. People care.
Right.
It's just that they need to see how their action is going to make a difference. They need to have those conversations about who is causing this kind of problem, how they can organize to fight back, and what they can do to get involved. When you give that to people, they care, and they're going to step up. Unfortunately, a lot of our public systems do not allow that outlet, and that's one of the beautiful things about community schools. You find the things that people care about, the things that are going to get them to learn about all of these issues of their school funding and tax evadings and all of that. And then you get them involved in the fight that way. And they really do step up.
You know, I think that people have a big justification to be cynical about our politics in America. Let's just use a recent example where in Missouri, the people voted to give themselves a raise, $15 an hour. They decided to do that. And they also decided to put paid sick days and give women the right to choose again. And they voted for Trump by 15 points. They just did everything they thought was in their best interest. And the legislature overturned their $15 an hour. So you have the people who went and voted themselves a raise, and then you have a legislature that overturns it. That happened in Michigan, it happened in DC. So there's a problem in politics. It stinks. You have people that are not really representing the people that they say that they do. So now we have a country where 90 million people vote for one party, 90 million people vote for another party, and 90 million people do not vote. And we know why. The question is, what are we going to do about it? You have to run candidates against this. You have to remodel your system. And or else we're just, every 2 years, going to be saying, this is the most important election of your life. It's all going to fucking change when we know it's not true. And so I say that it is messed up what we inherited. And there's so much hope that we can see. We hear what Euler did. 80% of the students dropping out by the 10th grade, and now is one of the top performing schools. The cure to cancer is right here. It's not easily spread. So the question is, how are we using ourselves every single day to exercise our democracy and make it what we know it should be?
Yeah, I think we really need to rebuild trust in the process. I mean, you mentioned the state that you mentioned, but these things happen in Ohio as well. People vote for things via ballot measure, and then they come in and politicians come in, legislatures, they come in and they do all this little stuff to try to mess with the process. That degrades people's trust in the process. And then even what you said, I think I have worked in philanthropy my entire career, and one of the conversations that I always tell other funders is there's this conversation about systems change. We need to invest in systems change, and to get people to get this direct services is not doing it right. And I say, well, systems change is great, but if somebody doesn't have diapers or milk for their child or a good school for their child to go to, they're not necessarily making that connection because they're focused on survival. So how do we walk and chew gum at the same time, right? And community schools, I think, as you mentioned, can be a solve for some of that, because it's not just a place where children are educated. There are also social supports, as somebody mentioned on the documentary, that can be embedded in these community schools. And that's why I think this conversation is so important, because we're building a thread here.
Adding to that, we say the Community Learning Center Institute's mission is to create the conditions for learning and be a catalyst for neighborhood revitalization. So we are really focused on what is it that a student needs in order to be successful outside of the classroom, and taking a look at those indicators and providing those resources so that teachers can do what ultimately they do best, teach, right? But it's hard to teach when you have a student in a classroom who's facing homelessness or is sick and doesn't have the access to healthcare that they need. So we're really working to provide those resources so that everyone can reach their full potential.
Thanks all for that part of the conversation, and for the powerful reflections that you all have shared and also have been shared up here. So we've talked about what happens when schools close, the instability, the loss, the disruption. But communities are not just responding to harm. We're building alternatives. We're building a new future. We're imagining what a new future can look like. The Sustainable Community Schools model offers a proactive vision one where schools are not isolated institutions, but hubs of support, partnership, and opportunity. So let's turn our attention to what that could potentially mean in a place like Columbus. So we'll start with the first question. Based on your experience, we talked a little bit about this too. How can community voice be included in decisions around a school's future?
I mean, it is incredible when you start to get community members involved in dictating the future of the school. We've just been doing this work at Northland for a couple of years now, but you know, I had a meeting, or I had some of my students, Harlow and some of her friends in the class, and they'd come to one of our steering committee meetings. I asked them afterwards, like, what did you make about that, hearing from all the people in the neighborhood who are trying to do this work? And I remember that, Harlow, I think it was you who said it, I didn't know that people cared so much. I didn't know that people actually cared about our schools like that. And that was a moment of like, wow, you know, talk about like destroying apathy, taking that down and showing a vision, right? Yeah, what's your experience been like with that too?
Oh, just with like getting community involved.
I feel like it's super important, especially for students, because you are the future, so you have to, help them out and shape it a lot. Because one of the things we're actually doing with students to help them is we're trying to make a greenhouse for our schools so they can learn how to make their own vegetables and have that skill, and also help them with their better school. That's one of the really nice things. And another thing I like a lot is we're gonna try having a clothing closet for students who can't afford clothes. Have that for students who are volunteering a lot. I think it's a really
Harlow, can you hold the mic a little closer to some?
I feel like it's really important for students, and being able to do all these things to help your family, your students is super impressive. It's really important.
Christopher, you mentioned the NEA community school model. There didn't used to be an NEA community school model, but about 10 years ago, we were getting eaten alive by privatization. Charters, vouchers, things like that. I know in Ohio, it's like, I know you guys have different names, like community schools or charter schools, but I'm a little upside down here, but you guys know what I mean, right? And this is a coalition. This meeting is a coalition activity. So our coalition was really good about saying no to things. We don't want school closures. We don't want privatization. But what are we for, right? So we looked all across the country. Has any community in school transformed from struggling to thriving? Has anyone done it? There are 14,000 school districts. There's 99,000 schools. Has anyone done it? And it turns out that Cincinnati, and there were a number of others that we found, this was like a decade ago, and we're like, holy shit, they did it. Like, they did it. And like, no one was telling the story. Like, Darla King Mine, like, didn't fly around the country, she doesn't fly. So it's just like, so we actually had to bring cities from all across the country to Cincinnati to say, look, because we couldn't get Darlene on a plane. She like drove to Florida once for us from Cincinnati. But there is a truth that I need to say, that this community school model is like saying car. So we all know there are fancy cars that are made well, and then there are jalopies. And that comes with community school space as well. So don't think that like, oh, here's a community school, it's gonna be fucking amazing. It's not, right? It could be, or it could not be. And so the NEA community school model just said, what had succeeded? What were some common elements? And to get to your question, it was impossible to transform a school without deep listening and co-creation by students, school staff, family, and community, those four groups. You could not transform a school without doing that. And so if you run across someone saying that they're doing this community school thing, and they say they surveyed 5% of the kids and we're good to go, just know that that's not the model. And so the key to transformation is you. The key to transformation is you. and to keep the transformation in the community around. And there are no shortcuts. And that's what we learned.
You actually started to answer my next question, which was what evidence from other districts give you hope that we can do this here in Columbus? So thanks for starting that, and I feel like you have something to add.
I know that this is a hard pill to swallow in Columbus, that Cincinnati's doing anything right, so everybody. I know, but I just want to say, when I first started this work, I've been with CLCI for 10 years now. And actually, my background is in community development and planning. So I really came from the neighborhood perspective of what does it take for a neighborhood to be successful, and what does that look like? What is that connection to the school? And we were really siloed, and education and neighborhood development, they were not connecting the dots, right? It was like school over here, neighborhood over here. But we know, we have a philosophy that the success of the school and the success of the neighborhood are connected. You can't have one without the other. And you will see, where you have really strong schools, you have strong neighborhoods, right? And a lot of things are going, and that neighborhood is thriving. And so we really look at it as, how do you connect these dots? How do we make sure that our neighborhoods and our schools are working together? And really, if you look at it from 30,000 feet up, zip codes do matter, and those things are really determinants of a student's success. And so we work to connect those dots and make sure that we see, what's the improvements that we're making in the community, they are for the families that live there. And how do we kind of make sure that we're rowing in the same direction? So I just, again, and I do want to say, we've been doing this work for a long time. The facilities master plan started in the early 2000s. It's 2026 now. And it hasn't been, it's hard work, and it's hard and it takes time. But I do think we've been able to see really positive impacts on things that seem intractable, right? Like, how do you turn around a school? How do you take, a high school that no one was graduating to making it one of the top performing? And so you do that by listening to the community. And I think the power of community schools is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It is neighborhood by neighborhood, school by school, and it is local power, right? Like, those communities are really driving that. And we've really worked in Cincinnati we actually have Board of Education policy around community learning centers, so that it is really embedded in how we do business at Cincinnati Public, and that when we get a new superintendent, that doesn't mean that, they can't come in and say, well, we don't do community learning centers anymore because I have this new initiative. And I've seen in my time of the 10 years, we've had 4 different superintendents at Cincinnati Public. So we see a lot of changeover in that leadership role. So I think it's really important, again, the sustainability piece of community schools, to really make sure that the community has voice and power and decision-making, and that'll ensure the sustainability of this initiative.
Thanks, everyone. So my next question is geared towards you and Harlow. And even myself a little bit, because I have a child in the district. So the Sustainable Community Schools Model centers wraparound supports, collaborative leadership, and strong family partnerships. What could this approach bring to Columbus in this moment?
Oh my God, it would be huge. We have so much top-down decision-making in Columbus, and in our school district especially. I think that we see this especially with the most recent push for an academies model for a high school, for instance. It's not a bad idea at all to bring in more job training to our individual high schools, and not to have that centered at just Fort Hays and Columbus Downtown High School, right? This is something we used to have in our high schools, and we could have that around the district again. But the programs that are going to be at that school, how it's being implemented, all of the parameters around that are being dictated to the schools. It's not in conversation with those communities, and especially those students, to say what kind of jobs would actually make a huge impact in your neighborhood. What do you want to be trained on? What kind of things do you want to bring to the table? And that really is the difference. with a community schools model and that shared decision-making, you bring together a supermajority of all of those different categories of stakeholders in the community and say, well, what do we need and what do we already have? What kind of jobs would make that impact? So yeah, I think that would be a huge change for us.
Repeat the question.
The Sustainable Community Schools model centers wraparound supports, collaborative leadership, and strong family partnerships. What could this approach bring to Columbus in this moment?
I believe a strong family partnership would be huge, at least for my school specifically, because a lot of parents, they don't come to the meetings, they don't really do much for the school itself. So I feel like it would be amazing if we had them volunteer or like talk to their child about what's going on. I feel like, for me personally, my grandmother, she doesn't know much about what's going on, so I asked her. And she's actually really intrigued about it, and she likes it. And it's something she never knew about, like the food insecurities, the things going on in my school, stuff like that, you know?
So what I feel like I hear you saying is like you're communicating those things to the person who's caring for you in your home, and you don't see as much engagement from parents in the school. And that can be, as a parent, that can be for a lot of different reasons, right? But I know with my experience at the school that my daughter is in, the parents are very engaged. There's a very engaged, like, PTO, there's, we have family dances, and we have just like all of these things that seem like they're small ways to engage the parents. But I've met so many parents and people who work in the school from going to these different activities that we have all year, and it really does. My daughter was going to a different school a couple of years ago, and it wasn't as much parent engagement. And I definitely see a difference in the level of achievement and also just the vibes of the school. Like, it feels different going into the school. It feels like much more of a communal environment. So I definitely think the family partnerships piece from that aspect is super important. The more engaged caretakers are, parents, you know, the more the school is going to have an opportunity to thrive as well. So let's go to another question. So we've discussed what's possible when communities lead. Now let's look forward. If we commit to investing in neighborhood schools, if we embrace sustainable community schools, what kind of public education system could we build? What would it look like 5, 10, and 20 years from now? So let's imagine the future together. If Columbus fully embraced the sustainable community school strategy, what could that mean for student achievement, educator retention, and neighborhood stability over the next 5 to 10 years? Let's even shorten that timeline. And I want to know because my daughter's not close to graduation yet.
I think the biggest thing we can start to see is growth. We've seen our district declining in enrollment, funding, all the things for such a long time. And it feels like there's no real vision for how we grow, how we bring families back, especially when we're talking about the historic trends when it comes to redlining and the ways that communities have become separated through like white flight and things like that. I mean, we could really have a model that makes Columbus City Schools a destination, a place where families want to stay and to grow and you know, bring students back from charter schools, from private schools and private school vouchers. That's really my vision for this, that we have a vision for growth and making our district one of the strongest in Ohio.
Just a couple points here. The first one is, there's no way to get to the transformation that we all want without taxing the rich and major corporations. That's just it. So if you want to transform our schools and communities, you have to have more pie. There's no like dividing the pie any other way to get to where you need to go. So So that means you have to campaign and do political education so that everyone understands that the money is there, we just make a choice. The second thing I'd say is that even though there is financial difficulties in this district, and I'm not very familiar with it, but I do know all districts, that is the same thing because of that previous point I made. You're not aligned with your district. They can pay for community schools if they want to. They're just choosing not to. And so we found that all across the country. We actually made a pretty big mistake at NEA. We were like, holy crap, these guys were not like amazing at telling the story. We're gonna tell the hell out of this story, and everyone's just gonna gravitate towards this thing, and there's community schools everywhere. But the reality was, we went to superintendents and school boards all across the country. We showed them the light, and they just moved on. It was only about power. It was the power that students and schools' families and the union put together to go win that stuff. And when they didn't do it, we found new superintendents and new school boards that would do it for us. And so if you're talking about the future, you're gonna look up and look into your superintendent's eyes and know that they are reflecting your values. If you wanna look into the future, you go look into every single one of those school board members, and maybe it's a student out there, maybe it's a parent, and they're not, instituting their like special vision, they're instituting the community's vision. And so that's the path to freedom for everyone. It's all in front of us. And we at NEA are here to support you along your journey.
Going back, so again, Cincinnati has been through this story, and as I was saying before, at our peak, we had student enrollment at 90,000. It had dropped in the early 2000s to 45,000. And during the facilities master plan, it was projected that we would go down to 28,000 students by 2010. And so we were really, we were at a point where is Cincinnati Public Schools even going to exist, if we keep on going in this direction. During the facilities master plan and then adding community schools as a district-wide model, we now are the only urban district in Ohio that is growing as a public school. And we really, give the community schools movement around that as credit for that. We were at a time not passing school levies. We had, the trust in Cincinnati Public was nil, and we were really again at that crisis point. And now, if you look, levies are passing, enrollment is growing, and we've really worked to build out through policy that it is local community control. And so now, as an example, a couple of years ago, our district was facing a huge budget shortfall, as we are all familiar. And there was some talk about, how do we have resource coordinators at all of our sites managing these partnerships. And there was a target of, do we take funding for the resource coordinators and reallocate? And the community groundswell, they went into action and they shut that down very quickly. Because the community came and said, our resource coordinators are vital, our community schools are vital, we need to make sure that we don't lose this. And we were able to win that fight pretty quickly. And so I think, again, you put in the work, and again, you do have to make sure that, not all community schools are created equal. You have to put in the work, but we've been able to see as a district-wide model a real turnaround. And so I think that's the future, right? It's like we've been at the lowest point, and now being able to dig out of that through community schools and have those positive impacts on our students, on our communities, like with our families.
I'm wondering, obviously your perspective is from Northwood, right? But yeah, if we were, fully funded, we had a full-time coordinator, and we were doing community schools the right way and really transforming the school according to what students and families wanted, what would your dream for that be? Like in 5 years, what would we look like?
it would look like, I feel like a lot of students would be like graduating, learning things, and being more professional and happy because their family would be having support. And their feelings would be heard, their problems would start being solved. I feel like it would be really important, especially for the teachers. I know teachers can be stressed when it comes to this stuff, seeing how much students are like relying on AI and seeing how much they're like losing out. And like they should be more educated. So,
Do you feel like we're on the right path for that?
yes, I do. Especially we're here now. We're talking to like tons of people, you guys. I honestly had no idea. I found this out a few weeks ago, and I honestly thought it was going to be at the school. Turns out it's in this big station. So I'm really shocked. But it's honestly nice to see everyone here, seeing how much you care, and that you want to see a change in the community of our schools.
So I'm on the last question, and I'm going to direct this to you two. Looking ahead, what's your hope for the future of Columbus City Schools? I actually want to ask Carlo first. You said it yourself, your generation, you're the future. I hope to never have to go back to high school, so you will be the change, right? And so if you're thinking about it, what do you hope for the future of CCS while you're there and when you're long gone and moved on?
I hope that students can feel safe and happy with their community. And I want them to know that it's okay to struggle with assignments and things like that because your teachers are here. And what was the question? I'm so sorry. What was the question?
Oh yeah, what do you hope for the future of CCS? This can be personal, this could be like more broadly, just.
I hope for more money, I guess, because money is a big need for CCS. And I want more students to see how important we are and that we can make a change, we need to make a change. As long as we're together, we can make a change together.
My hope is that we really embrace this model as a city, as a school district. I've seen firsthand how transformational it can be. And I mean, when we visited Cincinnati last year, it was so eye-opening for what this can do to change the trajectory of the school district. To this point, unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of support, and that's why I'm still teaching and doing community schools on the side when I have the time. So the truth is that we're not doing it right now. We're doing the best that we can with the resources we have, and I really want to see a community school in every building. I think that this is how we build up our neighborhood schools and make them hubs of the community where everybody has a way of getting involved and can become civically engaged and civically active to make sure that our city is working for the people, not for corporations, which unfortunately Columbus has been for the past, forever. The last time Columbus worked for the people. That's really my vision, that our schools lead the change for our whole city.
Thank you. So now we've heard from you all on your perspectives, and everyone has been out here listening and I'm sure has questions. So I want to turn towards the audience. Does anyone want to ask any questions of the panelists? Okay, we'll start with Tammy. So I'm gonna address y'all what you're wearing because I don't know everybody's name. Thank you.
So what I was saying was that it will start with a comment, but it will weave into a question. There was a comment that was made that I absolutely loved, and it was in regards to the apathy piece. And for me, what I thought about that is it's not that people do not care. It's more that they may get tired of caring. And not caring sometimes may feel a little bit more safer when, you think like every time you begin to care, you begin to dream, you begin to see things are going pretty well with your school, you're kind of pushed down or disenfranchised. So the question that I have is for Adeline. I would say in this moment, I do feel a lot more empowered in regards to what is going on by this entire, conversation that we're having. But I would like to hear, Adeline, from you, because you spoke several times about putting in the work. What does community engagement for parents really look like for them to begin to care again? Not saying that they don't, but oftentimes it can look like apathy. But what does the work look like to really begin to involve our parents in these conversations, in the students, based upon the success that you all had in Cincinnati?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question, and it's a big question, so I will try my best. Really, kind of our starting point in building out community learning centers in Cincinnati was to do neighborhood engagement, neighborhood by neighborhood, school by school, and to go in and say, what would it take for you to send your child to this school? What would it take for you to want to live in this neighborhood? What is, a successful school, a successful neighborhood look like? So we started with those two big questions, right? That's a big question. What does the school need? And we really looked for, the starting points. We say the patriarchs and the matriarchs of the community to really bring them in and to help them lead through this process, because I do a lot of our work in community engagement, but I might not live in that neighborhood, I might not send my kids to that school. So we were really looking for who can lead this on a community level. So that's the starting point. You kind of find your local leaders and then build that out from there. Also, this work takes time. So in the conversation that I mentioned for Euler adding a high school, that was a 5-year fight with the district to get them to agree to add a high school. And a lot of the time, that's exhausting, right? It's hard to keep that momentum going when what you were hearing is no, and then that getting to that tipping point for a yes. And so what we really work on in the community schools and in my work in neighborhood development is building momentum through small wins, right? How do you really work on the low-hanging fruit and bringing in those successes to be able to keep momentum and keep everyone feeling hopeful and engaged? A lot of the times, I've done neighborhood planning work, and I hear over and over, it's like, I'll come to a meeting, I'll give my feedback, and then I don't see any change, right? And then how many times have we asked people to come and to engage in the community? And eventually that's how you get disenfranchised, right? That's how you lose hope. And so we really work on, as we are engaging the community, as we are hearing what they want and need, how are we bringing them back to say, this is where we are, see, these are our successes, we're working on bringing in this partnership, we want to make sure we still, we are kind of assessing that what the community wants and needs on a regular basis. And so I think it is really bringing in the community and having the community lead the work and kind of helping them to provide and support the resources they need, but then also building on small wins until you get to that big win of, okay, now we have a high school where we didn't before, or those type of things.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Yeah, I would say, to your point, a lot of it is leading by shutting up, which I realize is kind of ironic with me up here now. But like in my own classroom, what I've done with this is just ask my students, what would it take for every student at Northland to thrive? And then I say, I'm going to sit down, you all figure that out, and have a conversation about that. Really decide, what do we need? And then we actually work together to make it happen. So to your point, it's really bringing people into that work and having them fight for what they care about.
Just one little point on this. You see community schools make one key mistake a lot. They'll do this like thing where they engage 80% of parents, and then now they really know what parents want. And then they go make those things happen without talking to the parents. And then they're like, and then no one shows up for the thing that everyone thought they wanted, right? And the parents are like, we didn't want it like that, we wanted it like that, right? So every step of the way is co-creation. Just think of it like that. Like, did we just make a decision by ourselves, or did we co-create it? And if you co-create it every time, which is harder, it is better.
Every step of the way, co-creation. So we've got a person in the green sweatshirt who has the mic.
Okay. Yes, I am liking everything I'm hearing so far. It's making me hopeful. My question and my concern is, how do we prevent the local Columbus school system from hijacking the terminology of community schools models? And my example of that, I'll be brief. 32 years ago, they had positions, these were administrators, whose title was actually Community of Schools Leaders. These were awful people who were very skilled at saying no to anything you asked for. Even asked for something as simple as a book, study guide, the answer was no. So how do we keep them from hijacking the terminology and using it for the same old stuff? Thank you.
It's an accountability question too, that embedded in there.
That is super important, and I'll tell you that to some extent it's already happened too. First of all, we're called in our contract a community campus school because the state of Ohio calls charter schools community schools, right? So we added campus in there to differentiate ourselves, since they co-opted that language. We also, frankly, have seen this with the academies model, where I've had some other teachers who have sat in on those meetings and said, hey, this sounds a lot like what we're doing with community schools, but it's actually being dictated by the administration, so that's interesting. So how do we fight back? I think that it is important to have these kinds of conversations, listening sessions where we are hearing from the community what they want, and also educating people on this model and helping them to know what is and what is not a community school, so that everyone can push together for what we know is right.
In Cincinnati, and I will say, there's multiple ways to do this community schools work. We have a model where our lead agencies, we call them lead agencies, at each of the schools that employ the resource coordinator, they're actually independent nonprofits. They are not employed by the district. And I want to say we work really closely with the district. Obviously, we are building out community learning centers at their sites. But I think that independent third party is very important in order to be able to make sure that you keep your independence, and that when if the community doesn't agree with something that the district is doing, I'm not employed by the district, so I can go and be a true, liaison for their voice, where if I was employed by the district, I would be afraid to say, oh, no, they don't like the thing that they're doing because that's my employer, right? I might lose my job. And so I think there are structures and things that you can put in place to keep that separation a bit, to make sure that you have that autonomy and that independence, so that you are really the voice of the community, and you don't get into those situations where, a lot of the times the community and the district, they don't agree, right? And so how can you make sure that you can have that fight fairly?
It's actually one thing that Darlene, who founded the Cincinnati model, and I slightly disagreed on, and it was a good, healthy debate, was whether a district can do this themselves without having a community school coordinator be employed by an outside organization. And so to answer your question, how do you not end up with a bastardized version of the community school model? It's power. You cannot not have a coalition that pushes all the time to make sure that they don't mess it up. And so treat that bumper sticker, that 26.2 thing. Right now, when you pass the community school model, you've got 0.2. You just got started. And so we make this mistake all the time. We passed the policy, let's pack up and go home. We did it. And then we wake up and be like, what is this? That's what happens with what you talked about. That happens with policy all across the country, whether it's community school policy or not. Just treat every single time as 0.2. Never fold your coalition. Make sure that you embed co-creation into it. We created Community School Steering Committee. They wanted to call it a Community School Advisory Committee. We're like, we're not advising, we're steering. So build it in. They won't like it. They never like it. And the reason why I think it's slightly different dynamics than what Darlene was talking about is that if you have true power players that will push, like the Columbus Education Association and others, then you can transform a district into something that really reflects your values. And you don't have to be cynical about the public system that exists. But if you don't, then you're gonna have to find workarounds. And that's kind of what we see the various ways from.
Thank you. So we've got time for one more question. I see somebody back there with a mic.
Hi, well, I'm Morgan, and I want to thank the panel for moderating, yes, and I really, really appreciate the discussion. And I also very much appreciate the gentleman's question, because having been raised by a now retired educator who was in the Columbus system in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and had heard every term under the book, or under the sun, for how we were going to fix Columbus City schools, that was one of my reactions to community schools, like, haven't we done this? And now, as we all know, we're in an emergency situation, and we want to make sure whatever we're doing is going to work and make sure that our kids are going to be successful. And so, intuition, as I was listening to the conversation, was like, especially picking up on a theme that you correctly identified, Tria, about the lack of trust. And I think we all have kind of experienced this, and Columbus overall, for very good reasons. We've got to make sure we're getting people to understand exactly what we're looking to do. So anyway, intuition is it's probably going to require a lot of specificity to make people understand how it's different from all the things that we've all experienced before. And so, one thing that came up a lot in the listening sessions that the district was hosting last year and has been lots of listening sessions around transportation. It was an issue that I think got a lot of people's attention, because it was like, wait a second, we're talking about putting kids in buses that won't get to the school, and then they're going to be Ubering. What are we talking about? And so I'm curious to hear from the panel a couple of things. One, how transportation fits into a community schools model, and then experiences that you've had in other places around how that fits into the conversation, because that's certainly something that I've heard a lot of folks in the community want to understand as we're building towards a better district.
I'll just give an interesting example. In Florida, which is not a loving environment for public education, in one of the largest districts, Hillsborough, they were able to dramatically increase their attendance and the grades and outcomes and everything, because they installed street lights and sidewalks. And no one finds that on their school improvement plan inside of the school. So how are we going to get math grades up? Let's put some sidewalks. They don't say that. But if you do a deep needs and asset assessment and understand why 70% of families are coming late, then you figure out that their parents will not send them to school when it's dark out, and they're going to let them go when it's light enough to go to school. And then this has existed for years, but no one's paid attention to it. But then you can co-create something with the district to put in 18 street lights and sidewalks and get to where you want to go. So that's just an anecdote to say that every community school do that needs and asset assessment and visioning, figure out what's going on with transportation. Sometimes a lot of the problems that are happening in school happen on the way to school, on the bus. So figure out what's going on there. Don't just talk to the teachers, don't just talk to the gotta talk to the bus drivers, right? And sometimes they know the students more than anyone else. So that's part of how transportation fits in. It fits into the whole puzzle.
Thank you, Kyle.
Quick question, that guy, is that Morgan Harper?
Yes.
Okay, I got to vote for you when I was on the south side, so cool to see you here. Yeah, I love the question because I take CODA a lot myself, and I know a lot of our students do or sometimes do not because of some like safety issues that they hear and things like that. And to Kyle's exact point, when you're doing that deep needs and assets assessment, you find out like what are the conditions of the stops that our students are using most frequently? What does their travel time actually look like? And really, this is kind of the opposite of how those proposed policies came up, where it was like, well, we're just going to rely on CODA for high school transportation. And CODA wasn't involved in that conversation from the start, right? So then they got brought in a little later, but there is so much to be considered about how we can scale that. And yeah, with the community schools model, if it was like up, running, and everywhere, suddenly that conversation could be happening in the schools about what would the neighborhood actually need for that to be viable, rather than just imposing it and saying, hey, we're going to change transportation, figure it out.
Thank you. Does Cincinnati have something to offer on the transportation?
I'm not gonna lie, transportation's a nightmare. No, I think it is a really big issue, and the way that Cincinnati Public is set up, what we have found in going back to the community schools model, we really need to invest in our neighborhood schools, because trying to, take one student who moves across town and then have to bus them 45 minutes to get to their school, passing 20 schools along the way, is really unsustainable, right? And our biggest budget fight every year with the district is around transportation, right? And so we are really focusing in on how do we make it more sustainable? How are we making it so that students aren't spending so much time on the bus? But then going back to what Kyle said, doing that needs assessment, understanding what those students and families are facing, and then how do you make changes? And one of the things that we do, we work closely with city council and neighborhood community development organizations to enact those improvements and changes needed in order for those students to be able to get to where they need to go safely. I have spent, for one of our schools, I actually worked with the school and the city, and we worked to add sidewalks, and so that students who were walking to school within that mile limit, they were making sure that they could, some of the times they had to get pushed out to the street in order to walk to school. And so I've definitely been a part of those conversations. And I think it's an ongoing issue, but again, making sure you have the needs assessment, understanding what people are facing, and then working together to tackle those challenges.
Thank you, Adeline. So we are at the end of our Q&A session. Thank you so much for all the questions. And now we do have a call to action for y'all. Today is not just about discussion, it's about direction. And this gathering marks the launch of the Nothing About Us Without Us Community Schools campaign. We believe Columbus deserves a school system built with communities, not around them, and that requires sustained organizing, partnership, and accountability. So we have Izetta coming back up to the stage to share how you can take the next step.
Give it up one more time for our amazing panelists and our moderator, Maria. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Harlow. Can we give Harlow more love? Our student voices as a part of this is so important. And honey, you thought you was gonna be in Northland today, and then you come to this big old theater full of folks, but you rocked it. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you, Kyle and Adeline, for traveling. I know you just came up the street, Adeline, but thank you so much. Listen, we have heard a lot today. We've talked a lot today. Look at y'all. Wait, can you go back to that, Courtney, to
the word cloud. Over 90 of you have shared your thoughts and things about that and what we can be doing. This is super powerful. We hear in our board meetings from our superintendent, from consultants all the time about data-driven. Y'all are the data. This is the data, right? This is a part of that as well. And so this helps us with how we move into the fight that we are currently in, whether you knew it or not, right? There is a huge fight right now for public schools, not just in Columbus, but also in Ohio, because there's an attack nationwide and statewide to dismantle public schools. Y'all, and I'm all off script, can y'all tell? How many of you are Columbus City School graduates? If you are, raise your hand. Raise your hand. How many of you have students who are in Columbus City Schools? So many, but how many of you just live around the corner from a school, or maybe it was just nosy and was like, what they talk about today, right? Also, amazing for you all to be here because we all should have an investment in our schools in some kind of way. Columbus City Schools has endured decades of closures under investment defunding from the state legislature and a decision-making system that lacks community voice for some time now. And it is time for us to change the narrative. Courtney, you can go back to that for me. We want to change the narrative from closure, from managing to decline, from deficit to community-driven investment, to growth, to we ain't got enough money to build new buildings, but we gonna try to find it because we need new buildings because we busting out the seams, right? We are Columbus. We are one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, and Columbus City Schools should be the premier location for education in the city of Columbus. It should be. Listen, I was 5 years old knowing I was gonna be an East High School Tiger. I don't know what y'all thought, but I knew, and I did that, okay? And I know some of you all did it too. Community schools will also help to unite the efforts of our students, families, educators, and community partners so that we can improve student learning and well-being. You've heard from me on the screen, you've heard from me in the beginning. Listen, I'm the oldest of 8 kids. Do you know what a community school would have meant to me? I know what it felt like in '98 when we lost our home and I went to my band director and was like, yo, can I get that deposit for band camp back? Cause it's getting real over here. And what they didn't hand me no money back. But what they did do is sit me down, my band director, who I told her not to tell nobody. And she called the principal, and the principal came with his wife and 2 other teachers that I loved and I knew loved me. And they said, let's figure this out together. What your mama need? What you and your brothers need? We can get you some clothes. We can get you some food. You're gonna still go to band camp, right? We're gonna do these things. But imagine if the entire school was connected like that. All those resources that they found for us were right there at East High School. And this is when the band room was outside. You had to walk outside in the cold to go to band. Some of y'all remember that, some of y'all don't, and that's a good thing if you don't, because you got this beautiful new building, right? Because things should change and evolve. And this model, the community schools model, is a research model. It is data-driven, and it's an approach that strengthens our schools and that whole child, not part of Izetta, not just, you know, the left arm of Marsha over here or this person over here, right? But the whole kiddo. And with that whole kiddo means that whole household. And in my household, it was me, my 7 additional siblings, my mama, my grandmama, my great-grandmama, my great-grandfather, and an uncle. Because if one of those adults went down in that house, everything went down in that house, right? Like that could be the difference between getting to school on time or not. And if y'all know me in high school, I was never on time, but I made it. And I'm here, right? But we know that families and scholars on the south side of Columbus may need something different than those of us on the east side of Columbus or the west side of Columbus. Columbus is a very segregated city. Yes, it is. Say it again. Columbus is a very segregated city. And so in order to disrupt that, we have to go to the hearts of the neighborhoods and have those conversations about what your needs are in the Near East. It was intentional having this program here. It was intentional having this event here so that you can walk through or drive through this neighborhood and see all the beauty of it, but you can't see the beauty of it without also seeing the folks, the damage that was done by the disinvestment. Yeah. But we have an opportunity to change that moving in action and doing that together. And we also want to help you figure out a way to start these conversations in your neighborhoods about our schools. Now that conversation is probably gonna start out like a little bitch session, if you will. And that's okay, because sometimes you need to start there because maybe you haven't had anybody outside of your home to talk to about the challenges that you've been going through. Maybe you've been signing up to speak at the board meetings, not understanding why our board members aren't speaking back to you. They can't, by law, they can't during those meetings. But we have opportunities and ways to have them hear you and to promote those two-way conversations. So you can do that. And part of that starts with leading a community conversation in your own home, in your own hood, in your neighborhood, right? Having those conversations. And so we have an opportunity for you to do that. From now through the end of March, Columbus Education Justice Coalition has partnered with one of our amazing statewide partners, Honesty for Ohio Education, to talk about these things together. And so you have up here on the screen, and as you leave on the resource table, there are toolkits for how to, one, join the next community conversation so that we can talk about this, talk about all those things that you put in the bubble. Will CCS support it? Who we need to vote for, what we need to vote for, what policies we need to move. I'm feeling empowered. What can I do? We have that conversation. But you can also have the conversation at home. You can, we got this nice fake spring. Some of y'all been sitting outside of Uppercut having conversations. You can have a conversation about our schools while you're doing that. And then when the snow comes back and you're stuck in the house, you can jump on Zoom with your friends and have the conversation, right? So we have those toolkits for you to be able to do that. CEJC is hosting our first virtual conversation on the 24th, and we encourage you to use the QR code to sign up for that. So with all that being said, thank you all for showing up today. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing that public schools and Columbus City Schools are worth fighting for. The people's state of our schools does not end at noon. I mean, I'm gonna let y'all out. I'm not keeping y'all past noon, right? But it doesn't end at noon. It continues in every neighborhood meeting, every organizing conversation, every act of advocacy that centers students and families. So please consider joining us on February 24th at 7 p.m. on Zoom for our first community conversation. And that will also be a train the host event. If you've never done anything like this and you feel like you can't do it, we're gonna show you boo that you can. And we need you can do it better than I ever could, or any of our organizers could, because these are your schools, right? And that goes for our students too. You can lead a conversation. We need you. Next year when we do this, and I'm already just putting that out there, I know my team is like, what? Next year when we do this should all be students, right? This should be a student right here. It should be student-led and student-led. So please grab a toolkit on your way out. Courtney's gonna throw up our next slide. It's gonna thank all of the important people that I'm gonna forget about because I'm old, y'all, and the brain is, you know, these 40s, these mid-40s, doing something. You laughing because you know, I feel that.
But together, y'all, we can build schools that are stable, that are well-funded, and that are rooted in you, in our community, because our schools belong to the people. Thank you all for coming. Have an amazing day.
I see it in you, so we can walk it out.